happened was I didn't really have an option. I had to take part in this law module called Gender, Feminism and the Law, which it wasn't the one that I wanted to take. I wanted to take another one, but the other one was full up. So I had to obviously pick from a couple. And that was one of the ones I was like, right, that might be interesting. We'll see what that is. And in the very first class, which I found really weird, like obviously, not that I'm being judgmental or anything like that, but my lecturer had blue hair, but I obviously didn't put a connection at that point because it wasn't something I was aware of, like all this blue hair feminism stuff that you hear people speak about. So she had said to us, like on the first day, draw a picture of what you think a feminist looks like. But I didn't, because it just seemed like a stupid question and not law related at all. So I just totally never did that bit. And then obviously in the very next one, we started talking about like women's rights and equal rights and like basically equal outcome and things like that. And I kind of said like men and women are different. So like a man and a woman doing the same thing won't have the equal outcome because obviously men are stronger and all that sort of thing. And then it moved on to like transgender stuff. And I was like, well, you can't say that like a man like that's dressed up as a woman is like a biological woman. And they were like, well, actually, I think it was a lecture. She turned around, she's like, well, what would you consider to be a woman? And do you know what? I was like super stressed anyway. I was like trying to homeschool and everything at the same time because it was like mid-pandemic. And I'm like, what a stupid question. So I was like, a woman. And I actually like looked down at myself and I was like, well, someone with a vagina that can give birth. And then everybody, because obviously we're on a Teams call, they all just started going like absolutely bonkers. And I was like, what's going on here? So I thought, right, I don't know what they're moaning on about. They're like, oh, you're a typical cis white girl and like calling me privileged and all these other things. And I was like, they've obviously misheard me. But because everybody was like shouting and stuff in the Teams call, I was like, right, what I'll do is I'll type it, because in that way they can't like argue what I'm saying. They can't say I've said something I haven't said. So I typed in the Teams call, a woman is someone with a vagina who can give birth. Because obviously I hadn't even thought like about the dictionary definition or anything like that, because again, I know that's like associated with the movement. So it wasn't something I knew about. So for me, like simple thing. And they were still like going mental. And I was like, well, maybe I shouldn't have used the word vagina. Maybe that's what's offended them. So I was like, do you want me to like use a softer word like fluff or a cookie or, you know, something that we're told to use when we're kids? It didn't work. They were absolutely going mental. And this just went crazy. So eventually, after getting called names, getting called transphobic, and I was like, not transphobic. This has got nothing to do with transphobia. This is just me telling you what a woman is. You asked me to answer a question. I have done it. That's not transphobia. That's me answering a question in a law class with facts. So afterwards, obviously, I went to my other half and I was like, you'll never believe what's just happened in this law class. And I told him, and he was like, yeah, that was always going to happen. And I was like, what do you mean that was always going to happen? He's like, it's just this stuff's coming over from the States. He's like, did you not know about this? And I was like, no. So he had told me about like the Fallon Fox stuff. And obviously my kids do MMA, so it was of interest to me to know about this thing. So when we went back into the next lecture the next week, obviously we're still discussing the transgender issues. So I submitted an article and I'd said, this was what I was trying to get at. Fallon Fox is a man and he went into the ring with a woman and he beat her up. In like 37 seconds, he broke her skull. You can't say that that's a woman. That's quite obviously a man. And I was like, obviously trying to defend my point and show them that I wasn't being transphobic and I'm like sticking up for like women essentially, without knowing that I was sticking up for women, but try to get my point across that you can't have men and women doing like martial arts against each other because you've got like these different things. And at which point they're like, oh, that's so transphobic, I can't believe you'd say that. And then I got muted for a while from the lecture. She muted me because she didn't want to hear my opinions in the class, even though it was a class on opinions and apparently it wasn't even a law class. And so from the transgender aspect, they're like, oh, so women aren't equal to men. And I was like, well, no, in some ways we're not equal to men. Oh, you're a bigot and you're this, and like that's just privilege, and just saying that was all for men and stuff like that. And I was like, well, no, women are not equal to men. I was a female mechanic. I know that I wasn't equal to my male counterparts in that garage. They were physically stronger than me. So if we were like taking out a gearbox or something, obviously you've got like 3 or 4 guys who'll stand around and hold the gearbox up while the other one's like undoing the nuts and stuff. I was never asked to do that because I was just a little woman. And I wouldn't say it's sexist. It's just obviously if you've got burly men and a woman, you're going to ask burly men to carry the heavy stuff because men are stronger. So that was another one where obviously they were probably building a case against me at this point. And then I think the one that really, really did it was we were in another class for another week where I'd been muted again. And the lecturer turned around and said that all men should be locked up after 6 o'clock because they can't control themselves. And I was like, well, you can't really say that. Like, you can't say that all men, you can't generalize and say all men can't control themselves. And she's like, yes, all men are rapists. And like, you can't say all men are rapists. I've got a partner, like I've got sons, like you've obviously got a father, a brother, a grandfather. You can't say all men are rapists. I went, for you to say that is like me saying that all Muslims are terrorists. And she was like, what? And I was like, so I'll mute for the dog. Mia. So I was like, you can't say that all men are rapists, because for you to say that is like me saying that all Muslims are terrorists. And she just wouldn't answer me. I went, so are you saying that all Muslims are terrorists? I went, or is that quite a racist statement to make? I went, because all Muslims are not terrorists, the same as all rapists, all men are not rapists. All rapists are men, but all men are not rapists. And she would, I don't know if it's because I brought obviously another race into it or another religion into it. And she was like, oh, right, this is not territory I want to get in, because I felt like the example I was using to compare it was quite a good example, and she just wouldn't take me up on it. At which point they started threatening my children. They said that they hoped my children got attacked in the street because they were boys and they had penises, which actually now looking back, going by what I said about women having vaginas and them saying my boys were boys and they hope they got attacked for having penises, was probably quite transphobic, because maybe my boys are girls with penises. But obviously at the time I didn't know that.
Did they say this to you in the classroom?
They said that in a recorded class, all these classes were recorded.
And they were threatening your children?
They threatened my children in the class, and they said they hoped my children got attacked because they were boys and they would go on to be rapists. And at this point, I was really annoyed. And just out of sheer frustration, I didn't shout. I maybe raised my tone a bit, but not in a shouting manner. I went, do you know what? You're all nothing but men-hating feminists. And I switched off because I thought, I can't sit here while they're abusing my children. Like, fair enough, dislike me, call me names and things like that. But my children at the time were, what was that, like 2 years ago? So my children were 9 and 7. Even if they were older, it doesn't matter. You don't attack somebody's child because you don't like their opinions. So yeah, I told them they were men-hating feminists, and I still stand by that, because from what I can see now, there are different kinds of feminism, and there's obviously their sort of kind of feminism where they hate men unless they're wearing a dress, because then they're women. But obviously at the time, it was all mental. So then obviously after all that happened, I was really worked up. I came out of the class. I think I sat and just calmed down for about 5 minutes, and I was like, right, you need to pull yourself together. You can't sit out this class because people are being horrible. So I logged back in, sat quiet for the rest of the class. We discussed various things. And then that was the last class, thankfully, that I had to attend for that module. And then obviously we had to finish our essays and like do dissertations and things like that. So I was obviously doing that. I did send an email to the university after that class, and I just sent it to the student inquiry centre place where you obviously go to when you need support and things like that. And I just kind of gave them an outline of what happened in class. I told them I had been called names I found quite unfounded and didn't deserve to be called. I told them about the threats against my children and some of the obscene things they said about my children, which I obviously can't discuss everything because a lot of it's on the court papers that, well, it's not on the court papers yet, but it will be published later. But I don't want to jeopardise anything. But I did make the university aware of everything that happened. But I did say to them, I don't feel like this class should be cancelled. And I don't want to put a complaint in just now, but I want to make you aware that these things are happening under this lecturer, Mia enough. Maybe get another lecturer who's got more conservative views and is more open to opinion and debate, rather than obviously this particular lecturer who obviously had like a motive behind what she was doing. So that's what I sent to the university, and they didn't do anything at all. The university didn't do anything about that at all. And then obviously I got the email complaint, the email about the complaints saying And the exact wording was, there has been complaints made about you using offensive language or making offensive remarks during class discussions. So it was about what I'd said. It wasn't anything about how I'd said anything. It was purely based on what I had said. And then they obviously gave me 3 dates to which that I wanted to go for this meeting with the investigating officer. I can't remember which date I picked now. It was sometime in April. And during that meeting, the very first question she'd said to me, because I'd said, she was like, do you want to admit or deny the allegations against you? I went, well, all that I know is that I've made offensive remarks during class discussions. What were those offensive remarks? And she had said, well, we'll tease that out through the interview, was her exact word. And I went, well, I can't admit or deny allegations when I don't know what they are. Like, you can't expect me to admit something if I don't know what I'm getting accused of. What have I said that was supposedly offensive? And so, like I say, she said she'd tease it out. So the very first question she actually asked me, I'm not even joking, did you say that only women have vaginas? And I was like, yeah, obviously. Is this one of the questions? And she's like, so you did say that? I'm like, yeah, I said that. I went, well, women do have vaginas, don't they? And she was very much squirming in her seat. She didn't like speaking about it at all. I think she was uncomfortable through the whole discussion. And then obviously she said, did you say that the physical strength between men and women is different? And I was like, yeah, I said that men are stronger than women. Did you say that not all men are rapists? And I was like, well, yes, obviously, because they're not. And what was the other one? Did you call your lecturer and your classmates men-hating feminists? And I was like, I did. And then I obviously explained why. And then I got accused of racism as well. I got accused of saying that the only thing you notice about a black person is that they're black. And I was like, we didn't even speak about black people. Like, that never even came up.
Just to interrupt you for a sec, were you allowed access to the recordings of those lessons? Obviously, they've been on I don't know, Zoom or Microsoft Teams or
so whatever. No, after the complaint went in, the recordings were brought down, which obviously was always going to happen, but the investigating officer didn't even know that the classes were recorded. So I had made her aware of that, which I said to her, you need to go and watch these recordings. You need to actually see what's happened and listen to what's happened. It's all been recorded. We've all got copies of it, sort of thing. Go and listen to what's been said. So she was like, I wasn't aware that there was recordings. So she said she would have to listen to that as part of her investigation. And obviously she did listen to it. And that's why the complaint from the university couldn't possibly be upheld. But when we, like, obviously when the Free Speech Union were helping me fight this, and it was obviously all over the news and things like that, we had requested all of the recordings, like they had requested them for their use. And what we got back was heavily edited versions. In fact, there was one class that was meant to be 2 hours and we got a 45-minute recording back. The first 30 minutes were the presentations, because we all did a 15-minute presentation at the start of the class. Every week, a couple of us would do it. So the first just 30 odd minutes were the presentations. And then there was a little bit of discussion. And then it was the one where I said that not all men were rapists. You see me saying that, and then it just cuts off and there's nothing else. But on this very week, the lecturer had asked one of the students to record this week, but obviously at the time I didn't know that I was essentially getting set up or anything like that. I didn't know that there was an investigation going or a complaint getting built. And I now find it very weird that the lecturer asked her to record it. And when they were asked why that was limited down to 45 minutes, they said because there was disclosures of rape in that class, which there absolutely 100% was not. I think that's why it wasn't upheld as well, because I know the investigator would have went and watched all the recordings, and obviously they couldn't uphold things. Well, the thing is, I didn't deny anything anyway. Everything I was accused of doing, I did say, yeah, I've done. Apart from the black things, that made no sense to me. But obviously all the trans stuff and the women having vagina stuff and everything, I had nothing to hide, because I don't see that I did anything wrong. Even naive me back then, I didn't do anything wrong.
So this, albeit naively, this happened in your final year of law, right?
Yeah.
And in the, how many years was that? 3 or 4?
Fourth year.
So you were in your fourth year of law, and you come across this at university. In the 4 years that you've been at university, you haven't been sent any equalities material by the university in terms of how you're expected to behave, or what sensitivities you should have, or what the university's equality policies are.
I assume it was probably on their website, but we were never signposted to it.
Okay, that's important. I think that's critical, because, you know, it's...
But apart from, there was one lecture after I said that only women have got vaginas. The lecturer did send me an email just saying that she was quite upset by what I'd said, and it upset some of the girls in the class. And basically just saying not to say nasty things anymore. So it was sent to everybody in the class. So I sent her an email back and I said, I do believe that this email is probably aimed at me. I haven't said anything offensive. I will continue to have opinions in this debate class. And when we went into the next class, she actually said, you know, everybody's been a bit nasty to Lisa last week. Tension got quite high. I mean, she didn't stop them threatening my children, but she pretended she cared.
You know, one of the things that you would think in a first world country, in a university in a first world country, is that there's space to challenge ideas. And in particular with undergraduate programs, if those undergraduates are going to ever proceed into postgraduate studies and study even further up to PhDs, one of the things that you want to know is that they're capable of challenging ideas and having some level of discourse where they can agree to disagree with, you know, it's okay, that person thinks that way. I can recall when I was at school in South Africa, and I was educated in apartheid South Africa, our school material was heavily cleansed. And I had a history teacher in my last year of high school. She was just amazing. And she would say, right, here are your textbooks. This is what we're going to do for the year. These are what your final exams are going to be on. It's going to cover this lot of stuff. And then we would go through the various lessons. And at the end of each lesson, she would actually, and this was before the world of the internet, she would encourage us to go and look further. She always used to tell us there's two sides to a story. Go and find out more about what happened. So one of the things that I didn't know, just to give you an example in relation to what white kids knew in South Africa in the 1980s, I didn't know that South Africa sent units of black soldiers to support the Allies. Everybody, you know, kind of thought that black people were just swept away under the carpet, and it was all the white heroes that went out and they fought during the Second World War and they went to fight in North Africa. The enormous number of black people in South Africa that went to go and fight during the Second World War for the Allies is forgotten. And I would never have learned that at high school if it hadn't have been for a teacher that had said to us, challenge what you're learning, go and find out. And I really enjoyed that class. For some people, history was a struggle. We were lucky we had a teacher that made us want to go and find out. So we went to libraries and we went to museums, and we got to interview people who'd fought in the Second World War. My father had fought in the Second World War. He was in the Royal Navy. He wasn't related to any of the South African forces. But through him, I had managed to touch base. And I realized that there's always two sides to everything. And this is how you challenge how we progress as people, as human beings. And what I'm struggling with is that it appears that you were silenced, you were stamped down on. Nobody actually, and none of the lecturers used the opportunity to say, oh, well, look, Lisa is expressing a view that is unpopular in the class, is considered to be bigoted, even fair enough, use that word. What do we know about gender critical feminists? What do we know that's out there already? And how can we contextualize this situation for Lisa? I don't see any of that happening. And that
No.
is teaching, in my opinion.
No, none of that happened at all. I would go as far as to say that the teacher was, well, the lecturer was on the other student's side. She had a narrative that she wanted to give everyone. She wanted to feed us a certain line, and she wanted us all to go along with that. And obviously, I was the only one that stepped out and questioned things. And even in her evidence that she gave to the investigator, she said, you know, Lisa had some very strong, disappointing views, and she backed this up with articles, etc. Which, to be fair, like, in a law degree, you're taught to have an opinion, you're taught to know the law, and you're taught that anything you say, whether it's opinion law, case law, anything, legislation, it must be backed up. So what she said was that I did properly what I was taught, but she didn't like it. So everything I said, I backed up what I said, and she didn't like that.
Right, yeah. The other thing that I wanted to ask you about, now I'm not sure if over the times we've been talking to each other we've ever discussed this, but and it's relevant only for one reason, is the Maya Forstater case. Did you know anything about Maya Forstater?
No, I'd never even heard of her until I think I was sitting in this hotel place with somebody from the Evening Telegraph, and we were doing an interview, and I was on BBC as well at the same time. I'd taken a break from that interview, jumped onto BBC, and the lady in BBC said to me, "Oh, Maya Forstater has won her appeal," and I had no idea who she was. So I obviously had to look up her case and find out, because I just didn't have a clue. Even like J.K. Rowling to me was just the author of Harry Potter. I didn't know that there was all this sort of other stuff that went on. So I was totally naive to it all. And I know people probably find that quite hard to believe, like students and things, but a lot of students weren't running the life I was running. Obviously, I was studying, I had 2 young boys. At that time as well, I was obviously homeschooling through the pandemic. When the boys were actually at physical school, I was at uni. After uni and after school, I was taking them to clubs, I was coming home, I was making tea. So I didn't have time to sit and Google like all the latest social issues and things like that. I just kind of dealt with real life and what real life was. And obviously before uni, I was a mechanic. So I was like, you know, going to work and like not Googling like transgender stuff and the latest social trend that was going on.
And did the university at any point suggest that they knew that you had a protected belief?
No.
Okay.
Because I didn't even, to be fair, know until later down the line that what I had was a belief. Because I don't consider biological reality a belief. That's why I'm using little fingers. I don't believe what I believe is a belief. Like what I believe is factual. Like only women do have vaginas. Only men have got penises. There is only 2 sexes. Yeah, you get the odd like person who's born. I don't know what the term is. Hermaphrodite. You do get that odd like abnormality, but just because that happens, that doesn't mean that's a third sex. Like you get children that are born and you know they've not got limbs or they've got extra limbs. That doesn't mean that that's normal. That's an abnormality. So there are 2 sexes. There only ever will be 2 sexes. Like I've got a female dog. I've had her neutered. She's still a female dog. If I were to get my males neutered, they would still be male dogs. It doesn't change their sex because you're chopping parts off their bodies.
I'd agree with you. It's all about variation and diversity within the sex itself, which is actually quite common. So DSDs, which are intersex conditions, are either DSDs of male or female, and it's very well documented, medically documented to be the case. So let's move on from there. How did this affect your graduation and then your ability to move on with your desired career?
So it did affect my ability to graduate. Obviously, we had an online graduation, which I absolutely was not attending, because the last time I attended anything online at university, anything I said was used against me, essentially. So that wasn't a thing that I felt comfortable doing. And then after COVID had ended, we did have an in-person graduation as well. And that wasn't something that I could have attended. I would have been worried that I would have been set up. I don't mind sitting on my own. That wouldn't have been a concern. I'd have happily sat on my own. Graduation was a big thing for me. It was a really big thing growing up. I didn't ever think I would get a degree. I came from a very poor background and I didn't even think I'd get into university. So when I did graduate, it took everything away from me. Like I always pictured that I'd like have this graduation and my other half and the children would be there. And it would just be like this big amazing day, and I could say, do you know what, I've achieved something that nobody ever thought I was going to achieve. And that was snatched away. And that, like I say, that was a really, really big thing for me. And I actually had errands to do in Dundee the day of my graduation, and it had slipped my mind it was my graduation. My friend had invited me round to hers. I went round, had a coffee and a blether, and it just totally took my mind off it. And then I had to nip into Dundee, and I actually had to walk past the Caird Hall, going into a shop, and I just felt like, I'm not going to swear, but it was horrible. Like, I just had this horrible, like, I was just looking at the Caird Hall thinking, like, I should be there. Like, it's been taken away from me. Like, this should have been my moment to be proud of my achievement. And I can never, ever get that back. But Claire Fox, she did obviously say something in Parliament for me, which was lovely. And I really, really appreciated her doing that, because that's obviously there forever. But I really would have loved to have the proper graduation with, you know, the robes and things like that. And my other half did say to me, well, I can go and buy you the robes, and like, we can go and have a nice day out and things. And I was like, I don't want to. It was really bittersweet. Like, I have graduated, I have got my degree, I couldn't celebrate it. And now my degree is not really worth the paper it's written on, because I've spoken to lawyers in Dundee and a few in surrounding areas, and the words they have all said is, we absolutely wholeheartedly agree with what you said, but if we took you on, it would cause too much backlash.
Wow, isn't that shocking?
So they'd have been as well taking my degree off me, to be honest.
You know, just the whole idea that because you hold a particular opinion, law firms are, yeah, it's this whole thing. People are afraid of their jobs, they're afraid of their livelihoods. There are so many people who are not talking about it in the way we are, myself, other people out there. I mean, J.K. Rowling, you know, she doesn't realize what a huge relief she is, and what she probably does. She probably does realize what a huge relief she is for women who go to work every day and have to keep quiet. And I see this amongst people that I engage with online, not only on Twitter, but on Instagram, and people who join online groups to talk to me. It's really quite significant that people just feel that, yeah, you know, biology is real, sex is a real thing, but no, we can't say this because we'll lose our law license, we'll lose our clients. Our clients need the Stonewall badge, you know, and stuff like that. And yeah, do you ever have any hope of being able to go back and work in law?
Do you know what? To be quite truthful, I don't want to work in law now. I think this whole charade that has been my life for the past couple of years has really, really sickened me. I don't want to work in a workplace where I've got to watch what I'm saying and tiptoe around and wear pronoun badges, potentially. What that might be what it is in a couple of years. I would love to have done law. I would have, but I just don't think it's for me now. And I feel like I've wasted a lot of time, like obviously studying and things like that. But I don't know. I don't know if I'd ever want to practice law now.
The next question is where we are now. You decided to go to law on this. What forged your decision to get some legal advice and decide that this needed to be taken further?
Basically, I think the biggest factor in it is I don't think that universities, being big establishments, should be able to bully the little guy. Essentially, not bully. I wouldn't consider myself bullied, but I feel like they kind of did. They bullied me into a place where they hoped that I would apologise, because I was told that if I apologised, that this would all go away. And universities are obviously a bigger power than like a single person on my own. And if a university can target somebody and try and make them cave, that means that all these other big institutions can do it as well. So I might not win, but if I can fight back to a university, and I'm a nobody, I'm just like some girl that went to uni sort of thing. If I can fight back at a big institution, then I think it'll give other people hope to do it as well if they find themselves in a similar position. And not even just that, I think even now, like, I would hope that the university would think twice about doing this to somebody else. And like, I don't have anything left to lose. I have lost my law career. Like, I'm never getting that. back. I don't think, and off the advice of other people, I don't actually think anybody in the law career sector will ever employ me, which is another reason I don't want to do law, because I don't want to have to pretend to be somebody else to get that career. So I think showing them that they can't pick on the little guy, and I think, like I say, I hope that this will stop them, or at least make them think twice about pursuing another silly, vexatious complaint against somebody stating fact in a law class where we are told to state facts.
So if hang on, I'm not going to be bullied. You found yourself a solicitor, and what happened then? He started to make applications. There was obviously stuff going on. You needed to go to law. You started a fundraiser. We know, one of the things that we do know is that women who stand up for themselves and they try to raise funds using quite a number of the fundraising platforms get deplatformed very quickly. We also know that people who use crowd justice don't get the juice that they need. So as somebody who's worked in web development and that kind of thing, your visibility just doesn't seem to be what it is for other people who are looking for support in fundraising. And this is something that I picked up quite quickly back in the days when the LGB Alliance were trying to raise funds. They just got kicked off every platform, left, right, and center. And there were plenty of people who wanted to give them money, but just couldn't. So I also am acutely aware that crowd justice will let people, because they did let you recently put up a fundraiser on there, but it's very clear to me that there is no search engine optimization. There's no optimization going into a fundraiser. I could see that from what you had achieved and when we discussed that.
To be fair, it was odd as well, because obviously I posted that crowd justice page on Twitter, and quite a lot of the time my tweets will get a lot of views, and this one didn't get the same traction as what they normally would.
Do you know what shadow banning is?
Kind of, but I don't really. Okay. Heard of it.
So it's basically, you can put stuff out there, but it, again, what I call the internet juice, layman's terms, and say you just don't get the reach that you've had before, and for whatever reason, the people who would normally see your stuff are not seeing it any longer. And there are ways around that, and that's something that we're now going to work on. But it's very, very clear that there's a concerted effort. I've become acutely aware, particularly in respect of complaints that I've recently had to make to the police about certain things that have gone on in our lives, that the trans activism world is everywhere. They're in call centers, they're in IT support, very digitally driven, very digitally savvy, and that's how they've basically got their foot through the door, because you reach the world much quicker digitally than you do if you're on your feet, basically. So you went to your solicitor and he started to make an application. And what was the application for?
So we made the application for stress and damages, because obviously during the investigation I was trying to do my exams. I did have to approach the doctor and get sleeping aids, and I spoke to the doctor numerous times because I was stressed out. I couldn't sleep. I had an awful lot going on. I was having those kind of moments where, like, my other half was really supportive through it, because if it hadn't been for him, I don't know what I'd have done. Like, I'd get up and I'd be like, right, everything's fine. Like, this is all going to go away. It's just nonsense. And then, like, come lunchtime, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. I'd be as well just quitting because they're going to take the degree off me. And I was essentially having like these big tantrums, just without stamping the feet and crying. Well, there was a bit of crying. And it was him that's seen it all. And He suggested, like, you're not sleeping, you're grumpy because of the stress that's going on. Like, why don't you go and speak to the doctor, see about getting sleeping tablets and some to help your stress levels and whatnot. So I did. I went and spoke to the doctor, and the doctor listened, and he was understanding. And I spoke to the solicitor, and the solicitor said, well, that shows real stress and damages. That shows that you have been affected by this. Yeah, I graduated, and I've seen people online like, oh, what's the problem? You graduated, you got your degree. Yeah, I did. I got a degree that I can't use, and I scraped the end of the degree by the skin of my teeth because I was so stressed and like typing. And do you know what? Like, reading back parts of my dissertation, you can tell where I've been focused before this investigation happened, and you can pretty much see where the investigation started and where the rest of the dissertation is. So yeah, I was really badly affected. Like, I was trying to be a mum with my kids as well, and obviously, like, I wasn't shouting at the children and things like that. But there's a point, and they're like telling me important things, and I'm just driving them to school, and like it's going in one ear out the other because I'm focusing on this big cloud above my head. Well, not driving them to school because it was pandemic. Actually, they did go back to school during that as well. But you're trying to focus on everyday life. You're trying to put one foot in front of the other, and you just can't because this thing is weighing you down. And it's a very real thing. Like, I worked really hard for my degree. Like, I put in the hours. And I gave up time with my family. I gave up like certain things with my children to focus on this degree. Like, the last couple of months, it was very much, I was locked in the office, just trying to focus on it. Whereas like they had fights and things that I had to miss out on because this was so important. And to put all that energy into something to have nothing left is really, really annoying. No, it's not even annoying. It's like, I don't even know what. It's just, it makes me really angry. Like, I don't think I deserved that for stating facts. I don't think anybody deserved it. I wouldn't have even reported the girls at uni, to be honest, because there would have been no point. There was a couple of months left. We didn't have to see each other after we got our degrees. So what was the point? It was needlessly cruel. Like, I've used that term before, but it was needlessly cruel. They put me through something because they didn't like my opinions. And they got what they wanted in the end, because one of them actually said in one of their witness statements to the AI, that I didn't deserve to do law. I didn't deserve to graduate, and I didn't deserve to hold a law degree because of my dangerous opinions.
Wow. Wow. And of course, everybody out there doesn't know about these things, some of these things that were said to you, the threats to kids, the opinion that's being expressed by other people who are now going to work in the field of law, correct?
Yeah, that's the thing that really annoys me the most. Like, I didn't do anything wrong. In my opinion, they probably did. Bringing somebody's children into things is doing something wrong. They didn't hurt me, like they didn't hit me or anything like that. They don't not deserve to have a career because of their opinions. But what they've done to me is they've stripped me of my career because of my opinions and because they don't like what I said. And that's cruel and that's evil.
I would agree with you. I would agree with you totally. So back to the application. So your lawyer made an application to the courts, and as I understand it, the university then made a separate application in order to stop the whole proceedings. Is that kind of how it worked?
Yeah, so basically we put an application in to go to court, and we said about the stress and damages, and we cited the protected beliefs. And obviously, I think one of our points essentially is, just because I don't like something about someone, that doesn't mean I can make a complaint about them. And then obviously the university have said that the things I said were harmful to the other students, and that's kind of where we're at. So the appeal got lodged. I think it was this week it got lodged, or last week, I can't remember. I've not actually spoken to solicitor since last week.
Just for the interest of the people watching the podcast who are not completely aware of how this process is going, you made an application. They made an application to stop the proceedings happening at all, correct?
Yes, we had a hearing in Dundee Sheriff Court. Obviously, we said what we said, they said what they said, and the sheriff went away for 10 weeks to decide if we had a case. And the sheriff has said that there was no real detriment to me. I've not suffered loss or stress damages. So my case isn't strong enough to move to the next stage, which is what we're appealing now.